Good afternoon, one and all. Thank you for your patience in getting started. We're anticipating and hoping that we will have some further visitors, and the good news is they will be coming in while I'm talking rather than hopefully missing the remarks of our distinguished panel. My name is Frank Gaffney. I'm the executive chairman of an organization called the Center for Security Policy, and also dual-hatted, I guess you might say, as the president and CEO of a new organization about which we're going to be talking here today. My sort of corporate history on this particular issue is not that extensive, unlike this group with us today. But we did present last year at CPAC the launch of sort of the precursor to what we're doing now, the Save the Persecuted Christians Coalition, we called it. And this was basically a pickup team, I'm fond of calling it, of people who are, by and large, very actively involved in the effort to address persecution of Christians, specifically by trying to alleviate the suffering that those who are being persecuted are being subjected to. This is incredibly important work. We are very proud of having such people on our team, and indeed, it is our purpose to try to help them and augment dramatically the work that they are about. And we're trying to do that, and are pleased to present for the first time here at CPAC a new organization, as I mentioned, that I'm heading up, called simply Save the Persecuted Christians. And its object is to do, as I think indicated, something additive, yes, something different, and something very much needed. And that is, in addition to helping those who are being persecuted, in addition to raising awareness of their plight, in addition to encouraging, as we all should, prayers on behalf of those who are suffering, to hold the persecutors accountable, and to create costs for their crimes against humanity. Something that is by and large not been a factor in the calculations of those who are doing the persecution. Indeed, it's pretty clear from the trends, which, according to estimates that have been done by friends of ours at Open Doors USA, the numbers of Christians who are being heavily persecuted, and I hasten to add, that doesn't just mean they're having a bad day from now and again. Heavily persecuted means they're being, tortured, raped, sold into slavery, crucified, or otherwise murdered, sometimes even on genocidal scales. That's heavy persecution. And according to Open Doors estimates of last year, about 215 million Christians are being subjected to that on a continuing basis. This year, in the updated estimates that Open Doors provided in January, they believe that number is now 245 million Christians. Now, I just would ask you to think about this for a moment. The number of lives that are being impacted, in other words, by this worldwide phenomenon of persecution, exceeds the cumulative numbers of people who were killed by Pol Pot in Cambodia, by Adolf Hitler in the Holocaust, by Joseph Stalin in his various predations against the Ukrainians and others. Even Mao Zedong. You put them all together, and that number is smaller than the numbers of lives. Not all, fortunately, are being killed, thank God, at this moment, but their lives are being destroyed, to be sure. And ladies and gentlemen, the point of this panel, this point of this effort, is that this is happening not in some distant time, but now, on our watch, in our world. So a number of us have come together, building on this Save the Persecuted Coalition, Christians Coalition, to start this new, we hope, grassroots movement. A movement that can pull in millions of Americans on behalf of the hundreds of millions of Christians that are desperately in need, and to do so in a way that might make a difference in those trends that are so horrific. Because all other things being equal, I think it's a fairly safe bet that the numbers of Christians next year that are being heavily persecuted will be even higher than it is today. So we're going to do some discussion of the problem and some discussion as well about what we hope, perhaps with your help, can be a solution to it. We'll talk about specific instances of persecution, what we're called to do about it, biblically, scripturally. Manifestations that are taking place again in our time, and some specific ideas about how we can help. We're going to begin with Pastor Dominic Sputo. I'm very pleased to say he is the newest board member of Save the Persecuted Christians. He is also the author of an extraordinary book, Heirloom Love, Authentic Christianity in this age of persecution. Pastor Sputo has agreed to set the sort of spiritual context for the phenomena of persecution and also the call we have to do something about it.
Thank
Dominic,
you very much.
Please.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here and to talk about a subject that is so near and dear to our Father in Heaven's heart.
Get right up to the mic or lift it up.
Excuse me.
The mic. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to set the stage from a pastor's perspective and a biblical perspective of the things we're going to talk about during this time. In order to restore our nation, the Lord says that we must humble ourselves and pray and turn from our wicked ways, meaning repent. That's 2 Chronicles 7:14. And in 1 Timothy 2, the Lord said, with urging us that we are to pray as a first priority for all those in authority, that we may live quiet, peaceful lives. He says it with urging, and he says it as a top priority. And I'm going to be the first person today to confess that for many years I've been complacent, and I haven't prayed like he says we ought to pray for these things. But the times have changed. And the time to really pray is now, before it's too late. But we also have to recognize that we must repent or our prayers will be hindered. Allow me to explain. When Jesus gave us his final instructions the night before he was crucified, he said, love one another just as I loved you. And he didn't say it just once, twice, 3, or even 4 times. He said it 5 times that night. It's as if he's saying to us, to me, and to you, if you don't do anything else, make sure that you take care of my brothers and sisters. The apostles heard him loud and clear. We see in Scripture that they taught the church to make caring for the persecuted a top priority in the church. We see in Scripture that they understood when people persecute Christians, they're really persecuting Jesus. And they understood that when they cared for the persecuted, they were really caring for Jesus. But they also knew that if they didn't care for the persecuted, They were denying care to Jesus. And that's why Jesus said, whatever you did not do for the least of these, you were refusing to do for me. It's as if Jesus is out there today and he's hungry, he's thirsty, he's in prison for his faith, and he's watching and waiting to see who loves him enough to help him. That's why in 1 Corinthians 16, the Lord ordered the churches to start taking collections every week, specifically to help poor persecuted Christians who were living in a foreign land. The problem is today, we still take collections, but we're not using it for that purpose. Less than 0.5% of what we give in America goes to help the persecuted. Less than 0.5%. We have virtually abandoned our suffering Christian family at a time when, as you're about to hear, they need us more than ever. Persecution is unparalleled in any other time throughout history. So what are we to do? Hebrews 13:3, the Lord says we're to love, remember, and care for them as though we were with them. The problem is 97% of American Christians are disengaged from the plight of the persecuted. And only 2 of the 20 largest denominations and only 3 of the 150 largest churches are actively caring for the persecuted. So how do we expect the Lord to restore our nation? And how do we expect him to allow us to remain in freedom if we're not willing to use that freedom to care for his suffering children? From 1989 to 2005, American Christians were silent when the Sudanese dictator Omar al-Bashir massacred 2 million Christians. It was during that 16-year genocide that Ravi Zacharias prophetically said, the silence of the many on behalf of the some will only breed evil that will ultimately destroy us all. Well, Zacharias proved right, and today Sudan is a global leader in training and launching jihad missionaries who are intent on killing us, killing Christians, destroying the Western world as we know it. The time to act is now, before it's too late. And then lastly, as Frank mentioned, I wrote a book. Everything I just shared with you is in the book and much more. It's available on the back table for you as a gift. If you'd like to give a donation for the book, any donations will be used to help our brothers and sisters through the work of Save the Persecuted Christians. Thank you very much.
Dominic, thank you very much. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Sayo Abijoye. He is a remarkable expatriate Nigerian, now U.S. citizen, who has remained very closely engaged with his homeland, which is, you will see on this banner. And by the way, these are part of a display that Save the Persecuted Christians has put together to try to raise awareness of the magnitude of this problem. And part of the point of panel after panel after panel is to impress upon you that this is truly a worldwide phenomenon. We're going to talk about Sudan in a moment, but Nigeria is one of the places where this genocide is underway right now. Dr. Abijoye is the president of Redeemer's Bible College and Seminary in Dallas, Texas. He is also the founder of Mission Africa International and has just recently returned from a fact-finding mission to northern Nigeria, which, on the eve of the elections that have just taken place, as he will describe, is one of the most volatile areas of the world for this phenomenon of persecution of Christians. Dr. Abijoye, Dr. Sayo, please.
Good afternoon. I'm grateful to the leadership of Save the Persecuted Christians for giving us the opportunity to make...
Open the microphone. Lift it up.
Just speak more
lift
loudly.
it up. There you go.
For giving us the opportunity to make this presentation. What we are talking about, I saw it live and direct. I'm not from northern Nigeria. I'm a scion of the southwestern leadership. So I have no grouse in their fight. But Jesus said, if you do this for the least, you have done it for me. So I took off from the United States of America January 28 this year because I felt the Lord wanted us to do. And I went to Nigeria. And I didn't stay in the cities. I went to the highways and the byways, the forsaken places, the places that even people in Nigeria would not go to. So I went to the war front. I interacted with women, and women after women told me, oh, it's very difficult to experience. And I'll tell you that when I got to Heathrow, I had a little sense of what our warriors experience. Post-traumatic stress. I just broke down and wept for 3 hours. Just wept continuously for 3 hours. Because women after women told me, oh, Boko Haram visited our village and they asked my husband to come out. And any male member of my family, every male member of my family over 13, and they slaughtered them. And they say it as if it is just normal. That's just what you do on a Sunday morning. They slaughtered them. And I'm not talking about shoot them, boom, in battle. I'm talking about tie their hands behind their back and bring out a knife. That's what is happening in our world. And for what? Just because you are a Christian. There are all regions in my country that they don't just kill the Christians, they bring in bulldozers to raise the village and especially the church so that there will be no marker that there was a church there. So they'll bring in bulldozer and uproot the church from the root. And I have data here. EYN, Evangelical Church, one of the Lutheran offspring, the Catholic Church, and all of these churches, the Catholic Church have lost at least 300 parishes, 300 parishes razed, uprooted. The Methodist Church, United Methodist Church, and this week that we are talking about, some 44 people were still killed in the same, what would be the equivalent of a metro area where I work in Nigeria. So it's just like you are here in Gaylord and somebody is on the hill and 44 villages defenseless. People just came in and mowed them down. Last year, 3,397 people were killed in this way. And we are still waiting for one person to be prosecuted. 3,397 verifiable killing that we can say, oh, it happened in this spot. This is the geolocation, and these are the witnesses. And not one person has been prosecuted, not one. So people say, oh, it is community clash. I said there is a conflict when two people are fighting. If I come to you and I shoot you, would you say, Sayo and that fellow has a conflict? Will you say that? You wouldn't say that. You say Sayo has committed an act of violence. That's exactly what is happening. So, and people will say, oh, it's community, especially the State Department, and I am coming to you as Americans, citizens, and saying, please help us give voice to the voiceless. Our State Department is taking a position that creates double jeopardy on the field. And I say this respectfully, and I ask that God will use someone here to be a voice to the voiceless. And I can tell you a lot of things. When Muslims are trying to play nice, that doesn't mean that persecution is not going on. Massive repression. If your name is John, in certain states of my country, you are never going to be able to attain to anything. If your name is Joshua, you're lost. Just because your name is a Christian name. What can we do? We cannot do anything else. We can pray. We can pray for the widows. We can pray for the fatherless. But we can do more than that. We can speak out in our own different areas. Not only that, we can reach out, just like Pastor Dominic said. You know, I spoke to, in one spot, about 400 widows. And I'm like, what can I do? Myself, my wife, and my friends, we have 200 orphans in a school, and we haven't even started. And we train them, we feed them, and there is no government anything. I just share with you the voice of the voiceless. Remember, just this week, 44 of your brethren sleeping in their homes were mowed down by AK-47. Thank you.
Dr. Sayo, thank you for that very moving testimony. I did want to say one other thing, and it'll come up, I'm sure, in the course of our further conversation, but Dr. Sayo and our next speaker, Dede Laugesen, have been very active with another of our coalition members, Stephen Anada, on behalf of the persecuted in Nigeria in the face of the kind of indifference that he just described from the State Department, to ask for a special envoy to be appointed in order both to help facilitate the formation of the sorts of American policies that are needed and to bring them to bear in Nigeria. And we're very hopeful that that will happen. Let me introduce properly Dede Laugesen. Dede is the executive director of Save the Persecuted Christians. She is an extraordinary individual. I think of her as kind of a polymath with deep expertise in myriad things that this coalition very much has benefited from and needs, including in the media and events and politics and policy, and is just indispensable to this effort. And we've asked Dede to come and talk a bit about the global character of this problem and the sorts of forces that are behind it that require our urgent attention. Dede Laugesen, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, everybody who's here today. And thank you so much for coming to hear about this very, very pressing and important issue. The fact that there are empty seats in the room is indicative of the problem that we face here in the United States. I want to ask you today, is the world at war with Christianity? Does this, what you see on these panels, does this look like casualties from war? Yes, it does. Here at CPAC 2019, many have heard that China has been for decades working at and executing a plan for world domination, while the United States has remained silent, passive, and in some ways complicit to this massive looming threat. Likewise, American Christians have been shamed into silence, while secular and progressive voices in media and even in our own government have sought to keep us in the dark about the brutal worldwide war being waged against Christianity in a growing and record number of countries. Rest assured, the cake baker here in the United States, the 15-year-old girl held by jihadists as a slave for life in Nigeria, and the imprisoned North Korean being slowly starved to death for the crime of being Christian, are casualties of the same brutal war that has been festering for centuries. This war, most accurately, a war between love and hate, a war between good and evil, is raging and spreading like a wildfire left to burn uncontrolled. All of this while Americans, citizens of the only nation in the world built from its foundation upon principles of Christian love and justice, are safely sleeping in a carefully constructed bubble of ignorance and distraction. This may be the most dangerous time in history to be a Christian. Unless we act fast to protect and defend our right to exist, we may, in fact, be facing near extermination on a global scale. Thankfully, the current administration, the Trump administration, knows what is happening and is feverishly working to battle back the threats to religious freedom that enable this plague of anti-Christian violence that other administrations have ignored or even encouraged. Of the communities persecuted for their faith, Christians are the most oppressed. The U.S. State Department Office of International Religious Freedom reports that globally, 80% of the world lives in countries where religious freedom is repressed. Aid to the Church in Need reports 500 million people worldwide are persecuted for their faith, and of those, 65% are Christians. Pew Research reports in July 2018 that Christians experienced harassment for their faith in 144 countries, a record number, up 34% since 2007. Folks, there's only 207 countries in the world. More Christians have died for their faith over the last 100 years than in all prior centuries since Jesus' time. Gordon Cronwell's Center for the Study of Global Christianity's annual report on the persecution of Christians says nearly 1 million Christians were martyred in the decade between 2005 and 2015, and we know those numbers have gone up. Global Strategic Alliance reports the Universal Persecuted Church had more than 26 million documented cases of martyrdom in the 20th century alone, more than the previous 1900 years combined. Jesus told us that the gates of hell would not prevail against his church, and I believe that. Christianity in the world will survive. But what does survival look like for Christians who have quite literally faced the gates of hell? There are 7.7 billion people on our planet. Of those, 2.2 billion are Christian. Open Doors USA, a human rights watchdog, reports 1 in 9 of the world's Christians face heavy persecution, including rape, imprisonment, torture, kidnappings, forced conversion, forced marriages, sex slavery, and even genocidal violence. Depending on the source, Aid to the Church in Need or Open Doors USA, 245 to 327 million Christians wake up every day facing this dark reality. Women and girls are particularly vulnerable and targeted. Of those persecuted, 60% are children. Drivers of persecution include religious nationalism. In places like India and Burma, authoritarian regimes like China and North Korea, lawlessness and secularism. For instance, in Mexico, where more than 22 priests were killed in the last 3 years. But for 68% of Christians being persecuted, the driving factor is adherence to Sharia, authoritative Islam's brutally repressive and supremacist Islamic law. This is true in 8 of the top 10 countries on the Open Doors World Watch 2019 list, where it is most dangerous to be a Christian, and in 34 of the top 50. Save the Persecuted Christians is sounding the alarm. With targeted awareness-raising campaigns, educational events, media appearances, and other community outreach initiatives, Save the Persecuted Christians is building a movement to save lives and save souls. We must pierce that bubble of ignorance and distraction. We are determined to expose the hard facts and causes of anti-Christian violence. It is our hope that as we work to save the lives of suffering Christians, we may also save souls by providing strong incentives for bad actors to embrace peace, repent of their violent misdeeds, and look with kindness on their neighbor. It is also our hope that the testimonies of faith born in the midst of adversity and shared by those who are persecuted will inspire and help and strengthen the faith of believers here in the West. We can alleviate suffering and save lives by fostering relationships and supporting public servants, government agencies, individuals, and organizations who report on instances of persecution and assist those harmed for their faith in Jesus. We seek as well to discourage and ultimately stop those who perpetrate or enable abuse of Christians. We will ignite an irresistible movement to build, to hold the persecutors accountable, and to secure significant political, economic, and other penalties on state and non-state persecutors of Christians. In order for us to battle back this malevolent darkness, waging war against Christianity, Americans must awake from their slumber, name the danger, and act quickly to defend and protect our right and the right of our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ out there to love and follow Jesus and to peacefully practice their faith. We invite you to become members of Save the Persecuted Christians. Join us in the Save Us movement. Become a voice for good and a doer of the word. Pick up the cross like Simon and walk with those in the world who are intimately united with Jesus in the crucible of persecution. Thank you so much.
Dede, thank you. As our cleanup batter, I guess you'd say, I'm very pleased to introduce Faith McDonnell. Faith has not only been a very active member of our coalition from the get-go, but she brings something very extraordinary to this effort. She has been actively involved for decades on behalf of persecuted Christians around the world, notably, but not exclusively, in Sudan. We've heard a little bit about that from Dominic. But we're going to ask her specifically to speak today about sort of the cumulative efforts that have been made going back to, among other things, her involvement with the enactment of legislation known as the International Religious Freedom Act. And what we must be doing today that will, with God's grace, enable this scourge on humanity to be alleviated and ultimately ended. Faith McDonnell. I should have said, let me just add her title. She is the director of the International Religious Liberty Institute of, the International, I always do this, don't I?
That's okay.
There's
It's a long,
so many
too
titles.
many words.
The International Religious Liberty Director at the Institute for Religion and Democracy here in Washington. Welcome.
You should wait till I'm done to clap and see if you want to then. Thank you so much, Frank, and thank you to my fellow panelists and to all of you for being here. I'm really glad that you're here and glad to have this chance to speak. I've been doing this a while, and what I want to do is share with you some of the things that I've learned along the way, some of the improvements that have happened as a result of things like the International Religious Freedom Act, but to give you, by way of doing that, what the characteristics of a good advocate for persecuted Christians are, so that when you do your advocacy, you have those things as a backbone for yourself. So I want to talk about the theology of advocacy for persecuted Christians, because I think the best place to get our characteristics is from the Bible. And I want to start with the Hebrew Scriptures, what we learn from the Hebrew Scriptures about being an advocate. Well, the first one who comes to mind is Abraham. Abraham was an advocate who bartered with God over his intent to destroy the city of Sodom, because as God said, their sin is exceedingly grave. And Abraham pleaded with God, got down to as many as like 5 people. And finally, the Lord of the universe answered Abraham and said, I will not destroy it if I find 10. Okay, 10 righteous men. So Abraham was an advocate for other people. And Abraham's example shows us that advocates have to be bold. I know it takes boldness to fight on behalf of others, even if you're not debating the Lord of the universe. We might have to debate Washington lobbyists, certain firms in Washington, D.C. that Save the Persecuted Christians is going to be going to bat against. Or foreign policy elites. And they think they're the next step down from God. So, not a lot of difference. So how can you be that bold? Well, as we find out about Abraham in the New Testament, in the great hall of heroes, the rock stars of faith in the book of Hebrews, advocates have faith. Abraham is known for his faith. And he took that leap of faith, being an advocate for the people before God. And the book of James says that Abraham believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. And it goes on to say that Abraham was called God's friend. So another characteristic that helps us as advocates is that advocates have intimacy with God. Another one who had intimacy with God in the Hebrew Scriptures was Moses. Moses spoke face to face with God as a man speaks to his friend, it says in Exodus 33. And he had boldness too. And when he interceded for the people who had just made a golden calf and were frolicking around a golden calf, and God was ready to just wipe them off the face of the earth, Moses was their advocate. He reminded God of his past deliverance of the people and said, you just brought these people out of Egypt and you delivered them, and are you going to wipe them out now and then have the Egyptians say, oh, look at what kind of God they have. He just called them out into the wilderness so he could get rid of them. So Moses had that intimacy that he could say that. He also understood, and this is something that we need as advocates, we have to understand the significance of history. Rather than thinking, at this point, what difference does it make, as certain people have said, advocates remember the past and understand its significance and the events of the past, their ramifications on the present and the future. So as Moses did that, we need to remember that. We need to remember the past and how we work with that as advocates. Advocates are politically savvy in dealing with the powerful. Moses talked about the fact that Pharaoh, who was powerful, would have this over the Hebrews if God was to wipe them out. But instead, he used his understanding of the politics of the situation. We have to do that. For instance, there was the contemporary example of President Erdogan and Pastor Andrew Brunson. We use history and see how that worked to go to the next case and the next case. We don't forget those things and start from scratch. There are many other examples, but how about a woman? Okay, well, the best advocate I know in the Hebrew scriptures was Esther. And she wasn't even pleading her case before God, which is daunting and fearful, but not in the same way as pleading before an earthly king of a different faith who could have you executed at any moment for coming before him without being summoned. So, as we know, Haman had convinced King Xerxes to give the order to annihilate every Jew in the kingdom. And when Mordecai, Esther's relative, told her what was going to happen, he declared, God has put you in this position for such a time as this. Well, we advocates have been put in this position for such a time as this. Advocates know that they are God's instruments and they behave accordingly. Esther told Mordecai that she and her attendants were going to do this, but first they had to fast. They had to do business with God. So they did that. Advocates have a sense of urgency. Esther knew that this was something that had to be done right away. And as we know, the whole story is fascinating, and Esther does just the right things as an advocate for her people. Finally, in the Hebrew scripture, the example of Job is that God himself was an advocate for Job. God testified for Job's innocence before Job's friends who were saying terrible things about him. But God himself was his advocate. As Job said, even now, behold, my witness is in heaven. My advocate is on high. As advocates, we testify to the innocence of the persecuted. In my years of experience, there were times when groups like the World Council of Churches, the National Council of Churches, was trying to say, oh, Christians are only persecuted because they get in trouble because they say things they shouldn't say. Like evangelizing, sharing their faith. And I heard one American missionary in the Islamic world say the only Christians having a problem in her particular country were those who had abandoned the religion into which they had been born. So in other words, she was castigating them for converting to Christianity. But as true advocates, we testify to the innocence of the persecuted. We also need to know about justice. This is from the New Testament, but Jesus told the parable about the widow and the unjust judge. And do you know that Jesus used the word justice 4 times in 7 verses? I guess Jesus was the original social justice warrior. But he said that this woman wanted justice. And that's what we need to do. We need to care about justice for those who are being persecuted. Finally, advocates need to reveal truth and expose and confront moral equivalence. In my years in doing advocacy, I have seen this, and Dede referred to it, others have referred to it. There is moral equivalence. Dr. Sayo talked about this as well. When you see a thing that says the herders versus the farmers, you're hearing moral equivalence between the people who are persecuting and the people who are being persecuted. We cannot allow that. We have to speak up about that kind of moral equivalence. This is also used when words are insufficient to describe the reality of the situation. That is something that has happened with Sudan, for instance. That is something that happens now in other situations. We have to believe in the power of forgiveness. We have to utilize every tool at our disposal. The USERF came about. Social media we have now. When I started this stuff, we were sending faxes and letters that had to be with a return receipt requested to labor camps in the Soviet Union. Advocates value partners. It was before the International Religious Freedom Act. It was the Jewish groups that came to us and said, "We want to help you help the persecuted Christians." And again, with Save the Persecuted Christians, this has happened again. The late great Abe Rosenthal wrote column after column in the New York Times until they kicked him out, and then he wrote for other people about persecuted Christians. We need to value those partnerships. And finally, advocates are creative. We find ways, these posters, these things that get people's attention, paintings, poetry, songs. And I just want to end by just sharing with you a song that touched my heart. I'm not going to sing it. I'm just going to read some of the lyrics to you from a song called "The Greater Tide" by a band called Attalus. And this is, for me, this was the picture of the 21 men on the beach in Libya being slaughtered by ISIS. I hear a memory upon the wind, a song of lost, forgotten men who lost their lives beneath the tide and woke up on the other side. Come hear the tale and stand amazed of those who rest beneath the waves. Their hearts were set, their minds were set, their hearts were brave. They kept their promise to the grave. Some faced the sword, some faced the rack, some burned alive inside the flames. But heroes all, both great and small, they proved their faith was not in vain. Those humble men, those children dear, beneath the crushing wave they cried that saving name of him who comes bringing forth a greater tide. So come hear the tale and stand amazed at those who dance upon the waves. Their minds are free, their hearts are safe upon that sea beyond the grave. Thank you.
Thank you very much to each of you. We're going to take a few minutes for questions. I don't know that we have a mic, so we're just going to have to. Do we have a mic in the back? Well, while we're checking on that, let me just make one or two conclusory points. Several of our colleagues have talked a little bit about what needs to be done and what we're trying to do, and I just wanted to round that out with you. We've talked about prayer. This is clearly something that should be on all of our hearts. We have been inspired in this effort by an earlier campaign that was mounted, as many of you may remember, back in the 1960s and 70s on behalf of a different persecuted minority, Jews in the Soviet Union. And a movement was started, modestly enough, with signs, many of which appeared outside of synagogues and some churches. We have taken a page out of that playbook, and up front you'll see banners that we're making available to churches and other houses of worship for free, one per customer, to try to demonstrate that the congregants, the clerics in those churches are concerned about persecuted Christians, and to call attention to those driving by that this problem is real and needs their help as well. As Faith has mentioned, we're very much interested in trying to take advantage of past experience, notably one that just happened when Donald Trump used these techniques with Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey on behalf of Pastor Brunson, holding the Turkish regime accountable and creating costs to it, real costs in the form of sanctions on several sectors of their economy. We're also working to raise awareness, of course, but also develop campaigns on behalf, for example, of Nigeria. This special envoy is a very practical, near-term step that, with your help, we could, I'm quite certain, get adopted by the administration. There are techniques, some of them are already statutorily in place, like the Global Magnitsky Act, which can be used to sanction individuals, including individuals who are engaged in this kind of brutal repression of innocent people. There are other lines of attack for countries, as the president has shown. Sanctions, cuts in foreign aid, reductions in military sales, changes in the status of the political treatment of a regime, and so on. And not least, as Faith has alluded to, we're in the process of working to try to hold accountable not just the persecutors, but the enablers of the persecution. People who are representing the regimes that engage in this kind of behavior in Washington, D.C., for example, and holding them accountable as well. So with that, if there are questions, I think we have identified a microphone. Is it working?
My name happens to be Mike.
Mike
So I got the mic.
Thank you.
We'll
Mike,
go,
we've got a
we'll
lady
go ahead and pass that around, okay?
right here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you'd introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yes, my name is Christine, and for the past year or so, I've been reading about the persecution of Christians in China through World Magazine. They publish twice a month. And I was just wondering if you're aware, since the president has been in talks with China on economic levels, is there going to be an opportunity to bring in an awareness to what's happening to the Christians in China, as well as the Muslims?
Dede, do you want to take that first?
Sure, thank you, Christine, for your question. We are very concerned about what's going on in China. Bob Fu with China Aid sits on our board of directors, and he was a student activist at Tiananmen Square, and since has been living in the United States and advocating on behalf of the church in China, but also across the board for anybody of religious belief in China right now is being oppressed in the most brutal way. We know that right now, at least 1 million Uyghurs are in what would be called modern-day concentration camps. The Uyghurs are Muslims. We advocate for persecuted Christians, but without prejudice to others who are also suffering. And we stand behind all of those who are trying to raise an alarm about the fact that in our day, right here, right now, China is operating a concentration camp where more than 1 million people are imprisoned and being re-educated. China is working very hard to rewrite all religions in its form. So it's the Sinicization of religion, including rewriting scripture.
And the Ten Commandments.
And the Ten Commandments, taking out the first commandment completely, because that just doesn't fit well with their vision of what it should be, what people should do. And so it is very, very concerning. We need to watch China. We need to be, as we said, actively engaging our elected officials, telling them that this concerns us, and letting them know that if China wants us to be friendly with them in trade and in all other areas, then they need to respect the religious freedoms of those in their territory.
Let me add another point, if I may. One is, missing perhaps the most important development of all in this particular domain. If we do not recognize the commitment of the Trump administration to doing something about this problem. We've touched on the issue of Erdogan and Pastor Brunson. But I'm very hopeful, given that the president himself, personally, Mike Pence, who we heard from earlier today, personally, Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, personally, John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, former member of USCIRF, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, personally. And of course, Ambassador Sam Brownback, our ambassador at large for international religious freedom, personally are committed to trying to address and alleviate the crimes against humanity under this rubric of intolerance for religious freedom, and specifically for Christians. So I think your point is very well taken. Is it going to be part of any summit the president might have with Xi Jinping? I believe it will be if enough of us raise, if I could use the expression, hell about it. Yeah. We need your help in this regard. Anybody else? Questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's...
Mike?
No.
Mike? Who's got the mic?
I'm James Michael.
I'm sorry. James Michael, Mike.
Yeah, I'm Mike.
We'll get back to you, sir.
Hi. Yeah, boy, I was not aware of the detail that you shared about China. I think one of the things that I struggle with is understanding the worldview of folks like China and the Islam. And to that end, I've taken some strides into understand that. And I'll just throw a name out. Ken Carlson does an excellent job of explaining in a non-threatening way, but an accurate way, I believe, the different religions of the world and why they are doing what they are doing, which leads me to Islam. Of the 50 countries that you mentioned there, they're not all based Muslim Islam, okay? And I would suggest that most of the people in this room, including myself, don't really understand that religion. I think it's important to take time to understand it so that you can address it and get the facts. But we have a real opportunity today in the United States because we have one Muslim elected. That's a fantastic opportunity.
Several, actually.
Pardon?
Several.
Okay, several. There you go. See, I'm ignorant. Why aren't we making, or maybe somebody is, help me out, I'll reveal my ignorance, approaching these folks in Congress, say, look, help us out. I don't have access to a mosque. You do. Can you help us find the sleeper cells? Can you help us, I'm just talking about our own country now, but then when we've got all this stuff going on, why if they are, from there, are not willing to step forward, I just think we have an opportunity.
Let's try to get some answers to some very provocative questions. Dr. Sayo, you have been experiencing some of, you're absolutely right, sir, this is not, as I think Dede made clear, uniquely a problem with what I think of as Sharia, which is the supremacist code that the jihadists are trying to impose. But Dr. Sayo, you've seen it up close and personal in your native land of Nigeria. Maybe some thoughts from you on the challenge there.
You're not going to get help in that direction. Yes. Just straight. You're not going to help. You see, because you're talking about two worldviews. And one worldview says, you don't exist. That's Islam. When my country was fighting for independence from Britain, there were three major players, actually four. Would you believe that as late as 1940s and 1950s, people were still being sold as slaves in northern Nigeria? Academically documented. We forget things quickly. Now, so when we were negotiating for independence, there were four major groups. The Middle Belt, where they take most of the slaves, they had no voice. The Southeast, the religionists, the Southeast, the mercantilists, they are traders. So they are negotiating on the platform of what's in it for me, right? Okay, the Southwest, the community people. So they are negotiating on the platform of, does this feel good, right? Only one region was negotiating on the platform of a philosophy, and that is the North. And what philosophy? Jihadism. They were negotiating on the platform of, and UK defended them and protected them. And the first leader of northern Nigeria, Sir Hamadu Bello, has been very whitewashed now, said, this contraption that is called Nigeria is the estate of my grandfather Otman Damfodio, and we must do everything in our powers to keep the Middle Belt Nigerians down and bring the southern Nigerians under control so that we can, the jihadist proposition can take over the whole nation. Let me tell you, that Sardauna's philosophy is called Gamje. Every leader, every core leader from the north till today is running that philosophy. That's Nigeria. Now, the other communities are also like that. Every Islamic community is committed to two kinds of imam, they call it. There's the imam of the peacetime, nice, okay? And then the job of the imam of the peacetime is very simple, to prepare the way for the imam of the wartime, the Mahdi. I'm sorry, I'm taking too much time.
No,
Last week,
important background.
Last week, I'm on a WhatsApp group that included people from my secondary school that we graduated from 40-something years ago. And this discussion ensued. Why aren't Muslims speaking up for Christians being persecuted? You know what the core Muslim among us, who is my very good friend from 40-something years ago, you know what he said? Why are you persecuting us Muslim? Oh, no, we are not persecuting you. We are saying you help us. Exactly what you're saying. I said, you help me to be able to walk with you, who I have known for 40 years, you're my friend, to address this core issue. Last week, no response. No response.
Well, let's take another question if we can. Sir, you surrendered the mic. Let's see if we can get it back to you. Who's got it now? Mike?
I was kind of shocked on the Pastor Brunson thing because President Trump was willing to effectively trash the Turkish economy, which was a huge ally of ours. And as Armenians, we know that it's very hard to trash Turkey because it is a big ally. But he was willing to trash the entire economy to get one pastor who was under house arrest out of the country. And I was just like, it was like a game changer to me. To have the U.S. government willing to trash the economy of an ally, Turkish lira, 30-40% drop. The economy was in chaos for weeks until they finally succumbed. And I'm trying to understand, why are we able to do this for one person in Nigeria, in Turkey, and we can't do it for Nigeria? And I'm trying to understand, is it because we need somebody who's a U.S. citizen in Nigeria to have a problem? Like, maybe we need to send somebody over there, make him have a problem, and then let Trump go and get him out or something. Because for some reason, the U.S. government was able to do this to a huge ally, right? But we aren't able, and this is happening every week. People are dying.
Every day.
Every day. This guy was under house arrest. People are dying in northern Nigeria, and this administration is not able to do that. Is it because there's no U.S. citizens being involved?
Okay, we've got the question. Faith McDonnell.
Okay. That's a really, really good point, and I agree with you. I think it was because he was an American. This is in our interest. I agree with what Frank said about this administration doing more for persecuted Christians than I've seen in 25 years of advocacy. But still, he's an American. That's why we need to be knowing that these are our brothers and sisters and relating so much that we're willing to push as hard as if it was a pastor from America. When we talk about Nigeria, when we talk Sudan, there's an uprising going on in Sudan that hardly anybody's paying attention to. People being shot in the street by their own government, and then if they go to the hospital, the government is sending snipers into the hospital to kill the doctors so that they can't help the people. And we're not paying attention to it. And you know, our government right now is trying to normalize relations with Sudan, which, as Dominic said, is the incubator of terrorism. Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, Hamas, Hezbollah, they all get trained in Sudan. So, yeah, we need to do more to push on that.
Hi. I wanted to follow up on your comment, Michael, with the middle name. First of all, thank you for your being prayer warriors and warriors out there. This is a big threat to Christians here in this country, where Christians are being persecuted all around the world. But Islam, if there's a wonderful person, Bill Warner, who has written books on political Islam, that's the problem. And if you go back throughout history, in the Middle East, it was all Christendom. We were slaughtered back then because of the doctrine of Muhammad. And it's all written there. You can read the 3 different sacred books of Islam. Oh, and I'm sorry. But just get educated. It's all in the doctrines. It's what their goal is around the world. And it's happening in America. So my question is can we have some kind of big march with these banners? And they have marches. Obama let the Muslims march and pray in front of our Capitol. And why can't we do that? The pro-life movement is basically a Christian movement. They go out and they make a big statement worldwide. And if we have speakers like you and other speakers, I frankly think you should have been on the main stage so that we could have
Thank
What
you.
do you think about
Thank you. Absolutely. These are ideas that are definitely being battered around. What we're doing is we're making fertile ground right now. We're working hard to prepare the ground so that we can have a movement such as that is a march in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. And we've been touring this exhibit around the United States. It's available in 10 different states right now. Tens of thousands of people have seen it since the U.S. Ministerial to Advance Religious Freedom this past summer, where we debuted it at the U.S. Capitol for lawmakers. And I want to make clear, I want to follow up on your question as well, that what we need to do is help people understand that protecting and defending our Christian brothers and sisters and others who are persecuted for their faith out there in the world is in the interest of the United States. The chaos that comes with the persecution that we are seeing, the very existence of it is dangerous for the United States. It's bad for our economy, it's bad for our national security. It's bad across the board. And China is taking full advantage of all of these states that are actively pursuing this persecution, whether it be in the chaos and being able to go into northern Nigeria and assist the terrorists by mining the lands that have been cleared of the indigenous people there so that they can get to the resources underneath their feet and turn that into weapons to be used to continue their march towards what is a new caliphate. We've seen in Syria and Iraq what happened when the Islamic State decided that they wanted to launch a global caliphate. Well, that global caliphate is now headquartered in northern Nigeria and the Lake Chad region, and it is growing by the day. And if we don't address it, it's not in America's best interest, I can assure you.
Dominic, Sputo, might I just ask you to say a word on this, because I think something you sort of passed quickly by, but is so important. And that is that if you look around us now, we certainly don't see anything, thank God, remotely like the horrors that are described on these banners. And I think what Dede was going to say is, if you would like one of these displays to take to your communities, that can be arranged. They're very portable, they can be set up, they can be moved. We've had them in state capitals, we've had them in the U.S. Capitol, we've had them in mega churches, we've had them in town halls. We'd love to have you help get this experience around. But the point is that while this isn't happening in America, other early manifestations of the persecution of Christians is happening. And I thought maybe you might take that if you would, Dominic, or any other points you'd like to make on this larger question.
Yes, thank you very much. And so a couple points on that. We need you to be activists. It's not just a strategic imperative. It's a biblical mandate. And each of you are plugged into a church that needs to be awakened and inspired. And so we are asking you to go back. And the good news is you have God's word on your side. Biblically, this is to be one of the highest priorities of the church that's free, is to care for our brothers and sisters that are suffering. And as Frank has said, we are losing our freedom. I see this. I've been doing this not quite as long as Faith, but I've been doing this for over 10 years now. And as I've studied countries gradually change and turn against Christians, we are losing our voice, and we're at the beginning stages of that. We're seeing Christians that want to talk about the things we're talking about today in Canada and Europe, and they're being arrested. 10 years ago, you would have never imagined that. And right now, we're not being arrested, but we're very unpopular. We're shadow banned in social media. We see where it's going. We have to act today. It might be helpful if we have a couple extra minutes to share the story of the lady, was it in Austria? It is a perfect example of things we would have never expected to have happened.
Well, this is a case in point, and it's only one. Her name is Elizabeth Sabatish Wolf. She's, I think of her as a freedom fighter, but she has basically been knowledgeable about specifically this phenomenon of Sharia supremacism from time she spent when her father was an Austrian diplomat assigned to Iran. And she was there during the revolution that brought Ayatollah Khomeini to power. And she happened to be some 9 or 10 years ago, I believe, in a meeting not unlike this, I suspect, small, private, and talking about the fact that Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, had married Aisha at age 6 and consummated the marriage at age 9. And she simply asked the rhetorical question, if that's not something we would call pedophilia, what would we call it? Someone was in the audience who recorded her saying that and sought her prosecution. She has been prosecuted all the way up through the Supreme Court of her country. Her case was taken up by the European Court of Human Rights, and she was convicted there of having given offense to others' religious feelings, which is essentially one of the manifestations of persecution in the West. They call it Sharia blasphemy laws that are being imposed at the expense of free expression. And it's not that far off here. In fact, I was talking with somebody at lunch today who talked to me about the fact that I believe it was Michelle Malkin, who was just here, who has been advised, I believe by Google or Facebook, one of them, that she will be banned. She better get a lawyer, because she has violated the blasphemy laws of Pakistan with something she posted on one of her platforms. And there it is, folks. It is coming here, and it is just one of the manifestations of persecution. You can dress it up in other ways, but it is, I think, fundamentally an assault on not just Christians, not just Christianity, but I would say Judeo-Christian civilization. Dr. Sayo, we're going to let you say the last word, and then we're going to close up because we are way over time, but thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very grateful. Something that, even if it is just one person that can take it home, is, you cannot placate Islam. Islam is implacable. It will deceive you when it's weak. It will seek to conquer you when it is strong. But what I see all over America is an attempt to placate Islam. And it's not going to work. Look at what has happened in just 1 month in the Congress. Just look at the trend. Just 1 month of Islam feeling strong. So the question is, how do we engage with Islam? We have to confront some of these issues. We have to be bold. There is no season like now that the scripture is true. Be bold, be strong, for the Lord thy God is with you. There is no other time like now, because this is the only place remaining. UK has crumbled. All of Europe is in shambles with regards to this. Africa is being pushed into the sea. The leadership of the Christian people, they're in trouble essentially. And I come as a representative of those community, and I said the only place remaining is here. People say it cannot happen. In Turkey, 1929, one day, the city of Smyrna was burnt to the grass. The whole city, the size of maybe Washington, D.C. or Baltimore, was burnt down in one day by these people. What did they call it? Turkization. What is Turkization? Jihadism. So please, somebody have to be strong. Thank God for President Trump. Let's encourage him. I am coming from a background that know that what we are experiencing now, a lot of people are saying about President Trump, but the whole world is probably saying quietly, thank you.
I wonder, thank you, Dr. Sayo.
Sir, I don't know how long you've been going, but nobody else is coming into the room right away, so it's up to you if you want to go ahead and take a few
I've
more
been waiting for
questions.
somebody to throw us out, but if
I'm not going to throw you out.
you may
That
be
would
the
be
closest.
unchristian-like.
Are there further questions? Go ahead, please.
Right here in the front row? This guy in the front row?
We'll start right here, and then we'll come here.
Do you know why there are...
Could we use the microphone, please?
Do you know why many people are so cowardly in addressing the evils of Islam? In your professional experience, is there something that speaks to this current zeitgeist?
Well, let me take a cut at this because I've had a fair amount of experience with it. Look, part of it is a function of who we are as people. We are Americans. We live under and revere a constitution that guarantees everyone free religious experience and practice, faith. We have, I believe, as part of the problem several of our speakers have addressed, failed to understand a most important characteristic of Islam, which is that embedded in it is this doctrine that its adherents call Sharia. And that is an enterprise that has a patina of religiosity to it, to be sure, but fundamentally it is about power. It is a political, military, legal program that is intended to govern all aspects of a Muslim's life, literally. And everybody else's, by the way, if they are successful in imposing it, as they believe Allah has commanded them to do, on the entire world. So, if we persist in failing to understand that character, we will not understand or address that problem, because we're going to treat it as a religion, when in fact it is a seditious, very anti-constitutional, totalitarian ideology. And as such, we actually have laws on the books to protect us against it, but we have to understand that that's what we're up against. And to come specifically to your question, why doesn't that understanding exist very much in America today? Well, partly it's what I just said about, constitutions and faith and so on, but partly it's that if you dare to address these questions, whether you're Bill Warner or whether you're Michelle Bachmann or whether you're me or anybody else, you are going to be subjected to the most vitriolic effort. Character assassination is the least of it, to suppress your speech, just as they did Elizabeth Savage's Wolves in Europe. So you have to be willing to put up with that, and most of us aren't, is just the bottom line. And particularly, I mentioned Michelle Bachmann as a woman I admire greatly because she was a prominent political figure, of course. She ran for president of the United States, spoke here many times. She was politically destroyed by Senator John McCain for having had the temerity in 2012, together with 4 other colleagues of hers, to write letters to 5 federal agencies, very formal and polite inquiries, asking whether there might be in each of those agencies, she was addressing them to their inspectors general, there might be some correlation between the fact that in agency after agency after agency, steps were being taken to accommodate, shall we say, Sharia supremacism. On the one hand, and on the other, the fact that there were Muslim Brotherhood-tied individuals in prominent positions inside those agencies or in their advisory boards or what have you. So that message was not lost on anybody in political life. And again, my hat's off to Donald Trump. He ran for president of the United States in part on the basis of saying he was going to tell the truth about what we're up against. He called it radical Islamic terrorism. He laid out a multi-point plan to try to do something about it. And I think it's been somewhat uneven, frankly, because of the resistance he's confronted, notably on his effort to quite commonsensically stop importing more jihadists to our country. But that is the best answer I can give you to why we're not addressing this question in the kind of fulsome and full-throated way that honestly we need to.
Frank, can I add something really quick?
Wait, we have a question.
We've got several more questions, but Faith, quickly, yes.
Just, I would say, too, as far as the church doesn't do it either. And there's 2 problems. There's secularization of America that doesn't see anything about religion as a problem, just thinks that there are aberrations of people.
Well, except Christianity.
Yeah, that's the problem, right. Or secondly, within the church, there are people who really want to do good and want to be, say, missionaries in the Muslim world, and they don't want you to talk bad. They want to bring up, oh, well, Islam, we have these things in common with Muslims. And even when they know people who have converted from Islam to Christianity, they don't want those people to talk about it because they want to keep things on an even keel, but it's not going to stay on.
Well, but in part because it's risky to do otherwise.
Yeah.
Risky to their mission,
So
risky to
they're
their
in a
congregants.
state of,
Doug Burton?
I got a question here, and then he's going to get the mic next.
Okay.
Just a real quick comment to this gentleman's statement. Actually, our government has intervened in Nigeria on behalf of a Nigerian. During the last election, the Obama administration intervened in the Nigerian elections and destroyed the Christian economy by zeroing out their purchase of oil so that Muhammad Buhari could win. So,
Well, you have so much time and you want to just hit what is important. If there is anybody, any administration that has done, in my own estimation, it's difficult to explain. It's Obama administration. Damage.
Harm.
Destroyed not just Christianity, whole region, lifestyle. the nation of Libya, the nation of Tunisia, Egypt, now Mali, Burkina Faso, Sudan, Nigeria, Obama administration.
Doug Burton.
Wait, no.
Sorry, thought you were pointing to the other gentleman. Go ahead, sir.
All right, so
You got a question, right?
This is a question.
Go on, do a quick little intro. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Just keep it brief so other people can be heard from.
yeah, absolutely. So I just want to thank you guys for coming here because there are a lot of people who are Christians, but they're afraid, or they are, or they feel like I don't know the word for it, but you guys, I appreciate you guys for being here. Out of all of the thousands of people that I've met or I've been around and they have claimed that they are Christians, we don't even see them all in this seating. Mm-hmm. And for another comment that I would like to say, we need grassroots Christians to come together and start like an activist group. And start marching down at the Capitol Hill and just being more involved in the government. I believe in prayer, but without actually doing something. What's that saying?
Prayer without action.
Faith without works is dead, right?
Right.
So, we could pray all we want, but until we actually start doing something and actually being involved and being in the communities, and also the millennials are the next future, and what we need to do is have more millennials and youth people be more of I don't know the word. I'm sorry, my brain.
Active.
Yeah, more active. Like we need more
engaged.
We need more young leaders to be more present in the media instead of, I don't mean no disrespect. Instead of older folks.
Farts.
Older folks. If we want to be able to get to the youth, we have to start
Developing right now. It should be launching in the next couple of weeks on a platform called Encounter Truth, where Elizabeth Savage Wolf and others will also have webcasts. We are launching a webcast called Power of Prayer for the Persecuted, at which point in time I bring in people from those countries out there to actually tell their story right there and then with you through the amazing beauty of technology, modern day technology, so that we can bring that church of witness and martyrdom together with the church here in America that is the witness of hope and aid, that church of hope and aid, bring them together for prayer, for powerful prayer. So we are enabling that through Save the Persecuted Christians, and we highly recommend that you do the same with your church groups and just reach out through technology, reach to these people and give them hope. Let them know we are here, we do here, we see what's going on, we care, and we are opening our mouths and saying, enough, 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 enough.
Amen. I want to thank Burton Purvis. Pastor Purvis has been incredibly helpful, one of our volunteers in Texas who has been moving this exhibit around down there. He is assisting Dede in so many ways, including here at CPAC. And also just to say that Dede also has already built at the website savethepersecutedchristians.org, where you can volunteer to participate, get a banner, donate, order one of these displays. She has a link to a news aggregator which will keep you apprised of information that is developing around the world, and it's a very, very powerful resource. Ma'am, I think you're going to be our last question.
All right.
So over to you.
What I wanted to say was the political correctness in America is what really is holding down the knowledge of Sharia. And I wondered, how do we collectively, there are many organizations that are educating on Islam and Sharia, but in a more general sense, how do we get to the people about the danger of Sharia and how historically and how it is a political, it's a cult. So
Well, let me. This is an advertisement for a different program, but securefreedom.org is a website that will both provide you a lot of information in its own right and link you to others as well. Thank you very much to all of you. Please join me in thanking this great panel. Join us.